When Keanu Reeves arrived at his new villa, he witnessed a disturbing scene that left a knot in his stomach. His wealthy neighbor, a man whose name he would later learn was Victor Harrington, was standing on his perfectly manicured lawn yelling at a small, trembling dog. The poor animal, a golden retriever with soft, sad eyes, cowered as Victor waved a rolled-up newspaper menacingly. The sleek black car carrying Keanu had just glided into the driveway of his new home. It was a sunny morning in the luxurious Silverwood neighborhood, the kind of morning that promised new beginnings. Keanu rolled down the window, letting the crisp air ruffle his hair, and that was when he saw it. The scene made his heart sink. The dog whimpered as Victor's voice grew louder. "You useless mutt." Victor spat, his face flushed with anger. "Can't you do anything right?" Keanu watched, his expression calm but his mind racing. He wasn't the kind of person to look away, especially not from something like this. As an animal lover and someone who deeply valued kindness, he felt a pang of anger rise within him. But he stayed quiet for the moment, observing. Victor was a picture-perfect image of wealth. Tailored suit, a watch that probably cost as much as a small house, and an air of superiority that seemed to radiate from him. But what Keanu saw was a man who used his power to intimidate the powerless. And right now, that powerless being was the dog, who looked like he hadn't had a good day in a long time. Keanu stepped out of his car slowly, his presence quiet but commanding. He didn't want to make a scene on his first day here, but he couldn't just ignore this. As he grabbed a box from the car trunk, he kept his eyes on the situation across the street. Victor had tossed the rolled-up newspaper onto the ground and stormed back into his house, slamming the door behind him. The dog stayed there, head hung low, tail tucked between its legs. Keanu's heart ached. He had seen enough. Setting down the box, he took a deep breath and approached the dog cautiously, not wanting to startle it. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. His voice was calm, soothing. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The dog looked up at him with wary eyes, as if trying to determine whether Keanu could be trusted. Keanu knelt down, extending a hand slowly. The dog sniffed his fingers and, after a moment, nudged his hand with its nose. "That's it," Keanu murmured with a small smile. "You're okay." Meanwhile, from behind the curtains of his grand living room, Victor watched with narrowed eyes. He didn't recognize Keanu. To him, he was just another neighbor. But there was something about the way Keanu interacted with the dog that annoyed him. Victor felt no need to justify his actions to anyone, let alone some stranger who had just moved in. The following days were tense. Keanu settled into his new home, but he couldn't stop thinking about the dog. Every morning, as he sipped his coffee on the porch, he'd see Victor taking the dog out. It wasn't a walk, though. Victor's grip on the leash was tight, and the dog seemed to shrink away from him every time he tugged it harshly. Keanu noticed bruises and cuts on the dog's fur and knew this was more than just bad training. One afternoon, Keanu decided to take action. He couldn't confront Victor outright, not yet, but he could start by gaining the dog's trust. He began leaving small treats at the edge of Victor's yard, always careful to stay out of sight. The dog, whom Keanu started calling Buddy, would find the treats and devour them hungrily. It wasn't long before Buddy began looking for Keanu. The first time Buddy trotted over to Keanu's porch, tail wagging hesitantly, Keanu felt a swell of hope. "Hey there, Buddy," he greeted. Kneeling down to pet the dog gently, Buddy leaned into the touch, and Keanu could feel the dog's ribs under his fur. He made a mental note to buy some proper dog food on his next grocery run, but Victor noticed the change. He noticed Buddy's increasing reluctance to return inside after their walks. He noticed how the dog's eyes seemed brighter, more hopeful, and he didn't like it. One day, as Keanu was watering the plants in his front yard, Victor marched over, his expression a mix of irritation and suspicion. "Excuse me," Victor said sharply. "You're the new guy, right?" Keanu looked up, his calm demeanor unwavering. "That's right, Keanu Reeves. Nice to meet you." Victor's eyes flicked over him, clearly unimpressed. "I couldn't help but notice you've been getting friendly with my dog." Keanu set down the watering can and straightened. "Buddy seems like a good dog. I just wanted to say hello." Victor's jaw tightened. "His name is Max, not Buddy." and he's fine. He doesn't need your attention." Keanu's gaze didn't waver. "I understand, but if there's anything I can do to help, I'm here." "Help?" Victor scoffed. "I don't need help. Max is just a dog." Keanu's expression hardened ever so slightly. "Every life deserves kindness," he said simply. Victor's face reddened, but he said nothing more, turning on his heel and stalking back to his house. Keanu watched him go, a sense of resolve settling over him. This wasn't just about Buddy anymore. It was about standing up against cruelty, no matter how subtle or normalized it might seem. Over the next week, Keanu's connection with Buddy deepened. The dog began seeking him out more often, sneaking away from Victor's yard whenever he could. Keanu started teaching Buddy small tricks, rewarding him with gentle pats and treats. The joy in Buddy's eyes was unmistakable. One night, as Keanu sat on his porch reading a book, he heard a commotion from Victor's house. Raised voices, the sound of something breaking, and then a loud yelp. Keanu's heart raced. He set down the book and moved closer to the property line, straining to see through the darkness. He couldn't just stand by. Just then, Victor stormed out of his house, dragging Buddy by the leash. "I've had enough of you," he shouted, his voice echoing in the quiet night. He threw open the gate and shoved Buddy out onto the street. "Go. Get lost." Keanu didn't hesitate. He stepped out onto the sidewalk, his voice calm but firm. "Victor, that's enough." Victor turned, startled to see him. "Stay out of this," he snapped. Keanu took a step closer, his presence steady and unyielding. "Buddy deserves better." Victor laughed bitterly. "He's just a stupid dog." Keanu's jaw tightened. "Then why do you keep him? Let him have a chance at a life where he's loved." Victor hesitated, his expression flickering with something unspoken, but his pride wouldn't let him admit defeat. "Fine. Take him. See if I care." He stormed back into his house, slamming the door behind him. Keanu knelt down, opening his arms as Buddy ran to him, tail wagging furiously. "Hey, Buddy," Keanu said softly, hugging the dog. "You're safe now." As Keanu carried Buddy back to his villa, he couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and determination. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of something bigger, something that would change not just Buddy's life, but perhaps Victor's as well. Buddy sat on the warm rug in his new home, his tail wagging softly. He had never experienced anything like this before. The soft music playing in the background, the gentle voice speaking to him, and the fresh bowl of food in front of him made him feel safe. His days of fear and pain seemed like a distant memory, though they were still fresh in his heart. Across the street, Victor watched from his large window. He couldn't understand why the new neighbor had taken such an interest in that dog. To him, Buddy had always been a nuisance, too needy, too messy. Victor poured himself a drink and stared out at the peaceful scene of his neighbor and Buddy. For the first time in a long while, something stirred within him, though he quickly pushed it aside. The next morning, Buddy was full of energy. He followed his new friend around the house, curious about everything. When the doorbell rang, Buddy barked excitedly and wagged his tail. The visitor was a woman who introduced herself as Sarah, a friend from the Animal Rescue Center. She had brought supplies and advice on how to help Buddy adjust to his new life. "That's a beautiful dog," Sarah said, patting Buddy gently. "It's clear he's already feeling at home." "He deserves it," was the reply. "He's been through a lot." As the days passed, Buddy began to heal. His fur grew shinier, his eyes brighter, and his spirit stronger. Long walks in the park, playing fetch, and gentle pats on his head became part of his new routine. His new friend made sure Buddy felt loved every single day. But across the street, Victor couldn't help but notice the changes. He saw Buddy running freely, his tail wagging in joy. He saw the patience and care given to the dog, and it made him uncomfortable. It was a sharp contrast to how he had treated Buddy. He began to feel a sense of guilt, though he didn't know what to do about it. One evening, as Buddy played in the yard, Victor walked over. He stood awkwardly at the edge of the driveway, watching the dog chase a ball. Finally, he cleared his throat and spoke. "Can we talk?" Victor asked. The new neighbor nodded, inviting him to sit on the porch. Buddy ran up to Victor, wagging his tail. Victor hesitated, then reached out to pet the dog. Buddy didn't flinch or pull away. Instead, he leaned into Victor's hand, his tail wagging faster. "I didn't think he'd forgive me," Victor said quietly, his voice heavy with regret. "Dogs are amazing like that. They don't hold grudges, but they do remember kindness." Victor looked down, his hand still resting on Buddy's head. "I didn't know how to care for him. I didn't think it mattered. I thought he was just a dog." The response was calm and understanding. "It's never too late to learn." Victor stayed for a while, asking questions about how to care for animals and what they needed to feel happy and loved. Buddy sat by his side the whole time, as if sensing that something important was happening. Over the next few weeks, Victor began to change. He started volunteering at the local animal shelter, wanting to make up for his past mistakes. The experience opened his eyes to the value of compassion and the joy of helping others. He even started to visit Buddy more often, bringing treats and toys. Buddy, always forgiving and full of love, welcomed Victor every time. The bond that formed between them was unexpected but heartwarming. The once cold man began to smile more, laugh more, and understand what it meant to truly care for another being. The neighborhood noticed the change in Victor. He no longer walked with an air of superiority. Instead, he seemed approachable, even kind. The transformation wasn't just about the dog. It was about learning how to be a better person. One sunny afternoon, as Buddy played fetch with both his new and old friends, Victor spoke up. "Thank you for showing me what I was missing. I don't know how I'll ever make it up to Buddy for the way I treated him." The response was simple. "By being the person he believes you can be. That's all he needs." From that day forward, Victor continued to grow. Buddy became a symbol of hope and forgiveness, not just for Victor, but for everyone who heard their story. The once lonely dog now had two homes, both filled with love and care. And the man who once saw kindness as a weakness learned that it was, in fact, the greatest strength of all. The bond between Buddy, his rescuer, and his former owner became something extraordinary. It showed that even the hardest hearts could soften, and that love could heal even the deepest wounds.